Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Sokol. I do content at Orem, but I am not the important person in this moment. I am joined by instant best-selling author Leslie Venetz. She is the author of this book right here, Profit Generating Pipeline. I'm going to read the rest of it verbatim so I don't get it wrong. A proven
I
formula.
need to I don't even I need to start doing that. I need to have like a copy of, should I just like tape it to the
Just you should
wall
just put
behind?
yeah, you should put a whole thing right behind you. That would be fantastic. I would love that. Yeah. So anyway, if you are watching this, whether you are watching it live with us or you are checking in after the fact, you can go get Leslie's book, Profit Generating Pipeline, right now. Leslie, anywhere virtually books are sold, where can people get your book?
Yeah, anywhere. Virtually books are sold. My preference, if people are able to, is to support their local independent bookstores or someplace like bookshop.org. And I actually have a website set up that's salesledgtm.com/book. And so it has all of those options. And it also has a step two where you get some like automatic little freebies as a thank you for ordering and like invites to my upcoming little book tour I'm going to take myself on.
Yeah, that is so amazing. And I said instant bestseller because we found out just yesterday, you found out in real time and hit the USA Today bestsellers list. So congratulations. That is
Thank
amazing.
you.
So proud of you. Leslie is a wonderful person for a million reasons. I am fortunate that I've gotten to actually like hang out and get to know Leslie a little bit. And so I can tell you confidently she is just as wonderful as a person as she is as a sales leader. But we're not going to talk about Leslie, the person today. We're going to talk about all the goodness in this book. So I'm going to dive into a bunch of questions I have. And we're going to start at kind of the very top, the idea of earning the right, building trust before the ask. So the first thing I want to ask you is how do you define what earning the right means in a modern outbound sales context?
Yeah, I think the most basic litmus test is to just constantly ask yourself, have I earned the right to make this ask of another person? And so it could be something as simple as, have I written something in this email that is valuable to them so that I am earning the right to even ask for their attention, like something as simple as like their attention of opening and reading an email, or it could be as significant as, how am I preparing for this discovery meeting to ensure that I am showing up prepared and with a point of view to earn the right to their time and then eventually their consideration. So at every point in the sales or the buying process before you interact with the buyer, just take a moment and ask yourself, like, have I put in the work to earn the right to make this ask of another person?
Yeah, you and I talked about this on a podcast that we did, right? My favorite thing is saying like you need to earn the next second, you need to earn the trust in the next
Yeah.
second. And to me, if people are listening to this and they're familiar with Orem, which is how I imagine that's how they will see this, is if they're familiar with Orem, is one of the things we talk about is leaving voicemails. And we have data that shows like if you leave a voicemail, it increases future pickup rates by 25%. But like we our strategy that we tell people when you leave a voicemail is exactly what you're talking about, like earning the right, like give people some context in that email, just like, hey, this is Adam from Orem. Leslie, I'll call you back. It's, hey, this is Adam from
Yeah.
Orem. We get reps into more calls and make those calls better. We want to talk to you about how we can do that for your revenue team. Just so you like have that quick snapshot for you. What are some additional examples of where leading with trust transform outreach into a strong opportunity for you?
Yeah. Well, let's stay on the voicemail example for a second, because I think that's a really good one. So, what doesn't work is, hi, this is Leslie. I'm calling from the sales-led go-to-market agency. What we do is pitch, pitch, pitch. Call me back at blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Because all you're doing is like a one-sided pitch into a voicemail to a stranger. And I think what folks often miss, Adam, is that like they have not earned the right to ask somebody to give a heck about them. And so if we kind of like take a step back and look at it in the broader context, too often as sellers, we go into the outreach process, whether it's a cold call or a voicemail, an email, whatever it is, with the assumption that like this person should care
Mm-hmm.
about what we're saying, or like should care about us, our company, or our features. And that's a very, very false assumption. So what doesn't work is operating on the assumption that like we've already earned the right for them to care about what they're saying. One of my favorite things to do in voicemails is to just use them to point back to another step in the outreach sequence. So maybe that is like, I've sent you a note on LinkedIn because I see you're really active there, or I sent you this email, and in the email I've included a call out for a case study because it's so relevant for XYZ reason that I've uncovered. So I love using a voicemail to be super dialed in and relevant, and to increase the open rates or the engagement rates in other parts of my sequence.
I love that. And I actually got a question that really fits into this. So I just want to ask it right away from John. It said, how do you earn the right to ask initial pre-qualification questions on a first call encounter? Is that something you think is possible?
Yes. And so the way that I suggest that folks structure their cold outreach is in 7 steps. And we don't get to qualifying questions until step 6. So it's
Hmm.
like very, very, very late. So using actually some recent RM data that the average successful cold call is about 6 minutes. That's how I've always kind of structured the 7-step process, thinking that cold calls are like 5 to 10 minutes, because
Hmm.
it's sort of has given a hick over the years. And so you are going in with like your relevant cold call opener, your impact statement, and then at step 5, you're going to start asking questions, but those are going to be outcome based questions. So I always suggest that folks come prepared with like 5 outcome based questions. Generally, you get to ask like 3 to 5. And that's where, as cold callers, we perform like a little mini needs analysis to make sure that the thing we solve for is a problem that they have and that they are interested in solving, so that we're only putting qualified stuff into the calendar. And then what I actually suggest, John, is that after those outcome based questions, you go immediately for setting the meeting. And then once you get a yes on setting the meeting, then you go back and you ask the most important qualifying questions that you need to get done before you get off the phone. So I found that that works better because you have like built enough relevance and rapport. You get the confirmation of the meeting, which is the most important thing we're doing. And then you have a little bit more leeway. You've earned a little bit more time to ask those qualifying questions.
I love that. And I want to ask because like earning the right can feel like a kind of like an amorphous, like it's not like a quota setting thing. So for people who are trying to earn the right, h- can you provide like what are some practical signs or signals that you've actually earned the right with a prospect? I know not everybody is going to be the same type of prospect. So I'm curious, like, are there those signs or signals that you can identify?
Yeah. Let me answer this 2 ways. First, that the best way to earn the right is to hedge everything you're doing in relevance, and really making sure that you're constantly coming back to, does this matter to them?
Mm.
Because so often we are thinking about ourselves and our company and our product. And that's amazing that you are excited to be in the profession of sales and that you work for a company that you're excited to work for. You sell something you're excited to sell. All great. But how that shows up in outreach is like, I think our features, my company, I'm your rep. Nobody cares about that. So make sure that it is relevant. But when we talk about relevant, it's relevant to the prospect. And so
Mm.
you're going to see that reflected back to you pretty quickly in conversations, because when you, for instance, lead with a relevant reason for the call instead of a sales pitch, you're going to get fewer hangups. You're going to get more questions that are actually questions that are in, not like, hey, can you just send this over in an email? Please stop talking. You're going to get questions that are like, oh, tell me more. How does that, how would that work for me? Or who else do you work with in this, in this same industry? So you're going to immediately have more of a conversation and feel more of like a warmth and an interest from your prospect versus getting those quick hangups or getting kind of brushed off.
I love that. And I want to shift into a little bit of like framework and tactics here now that we've kind of established how we earn people's trust. So, how does your approach that you are providing people differ from traditional sales methodologies, thinking like funnel based selling? Like what do you do differently?
How does it differ? Well, I think in a lot of ways it's a compliment too, because I'm like, I'm not saying give up medic or give up band. Like it's not a
Mm-hmm.
qualifying framework. And so I think if we're talking about traditional sales methods, often people would think about like the qualifying framework they're using. And it is in complement to those frameworks. So it's not don't use medic. It's here's how to use medic in a way that isn't a check the box activity, that continues to center your buyer instead of centering yourself and like you needing to go through the qualifying process. um, but I would say maybe the biggest difference, Adam, is that so many of the like traditional or historical ways that we have been taught to sell have a like we need to win, and if that comes at the cost of our buyer losing, so be it. That's
Mm-hmm.
what it takes. And the book, all of it, like whether it's the part one where we're talking about how we as leaders need to like interact with our reps, or how our reps need to interact with buyers, or how, our board or ELT needs to interact with us, that's all very much benched in trust. And then when you get to part two, which is like the 9-step blueprint of profit generating pipeline, it continually comes back to trust. And that doesn't mean that like we're not going to ask direct questions. We're not going to push for the meeting. We're not going to disqualify people. We're going to have all of those sales best practices in there. But we can do all of those things and still do it with a respect of our prospects, like time and attention and the social capital that they would have to invest to buy from us. So I would say that's the biggest difference, is that
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that trust, not like manipulation or winning at all costs, or yeah, it's just all about
Mm-hmm.
building trust within our own organizations and with our buyers.
Well, and ultimately, I feel like you're gonna like in the long game, you're gonna end up being more successful that way anyway. Like I've seen so many shady business practices, working in sales and promoting sales. I see the good and the bad, and I'm just like, I'm sure you do to even a greater extent. Where like
Yeah.
people will talk about things like even like red flags, or like if a company is like, don't take, what can we do to make sure you don't take a demo with our competitor? It's like, "Well, that's a little icky." Or like, hey, what can we do right now to get you to sign on this dotted line, like right here? It's like if you're like all those things, all you're gonna do is sour the relationship, and then
Yeah.
when it's time for a renewal, they're gonna be like, I remember Leslie, that other company, Leslie really like, she really seemed to believe in what we were doing. Like, you're gonna ultimately have better success if you can do right by the buyer as often as possible, in my opinion, anyway. You might
Oh,
disagree,
yeah.
but I don't think so.
No, I don't disagree. And it immediately made me think of a recent conversation I had with a brand that was trying to sell me on joining their like B2B creator program. So becoming a
Mm,
brand evangelist to them. And on the introduction call, they talked so much shit about their competitor that I was like, if this is the way that you behave in the world, that your default, talking to a relative stranger, like it was my first
mhm,
call with them, is to, instead of asking questions about me and what I care about and what would make this partnership work, or talking about like the value you bring to the table, the way that you think you're going to win my business and my trust, is by absolutely dragging a competitor.
mhm.
That shows a complete like values misalignment. That's not somebody I would want to work with. And I mean, certainly that's a little bit different because it's like my reputation being aligned to their reputation. But even if we think about it in conversations between buyers and sellers, like why would somebody ever want to buy from a seller whose default is to try to tarnish the reputation of somebody else? So yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah. So, kind of with that in mind, what are some of the key elements of prospecting that you do teach that you see consistently drive results? Beyond obviously like the broad do right by the buyer type of a situation. Like, what are some of the elements of prospecting that you are trying to teach, especially in modern sales, which 6 months ago could have had a different answer, and 6 months from now will probably be different than it is right now. But currently, what are you teaching?
Yeah. Well, that made me think of one. First, I was thinking about like channel of choice, but the way you asked the question made me think about how much folks tend to chase like silver bullets or tricks and trends.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing that I talk about in the book, but it's just more of like a catalyst that made me feel called to write the book was stop chasing tricks and tactics. Because when you spend time, do like quick question is one I come back to over and over again. That it's like, it's not that quick question didn't work for a while, it did, but it worked for a while, then everybody used it,
Yeah.
and then it became a really easy to recognize pattern interrupt, but not a
Mhm.
pattern interrupt in a good way. It was something that our buyers immediately, where it's like, oh, that's a sales email, it sent off their like mental spam
Yeah.
filters, and they delete it. And so I find that salespeople so often are spending their time trying to follow these like trends and tricks instead of investing in sales foundations that are benched in buyer psychology or like behavioral science. So spend that time learning about the way that our buyers' brains work and how we can then deliberately and intentionally practice foundational sales skills that mesh with that versus like chasing tricks and tactics. So that's one invitation I would give people.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that like immediately popped into my head, because I have this conversation a lot, especially with younger sellers, is the idea of channel of choice. And I am really, really adamant that if you are doing B2B outbound, you should have three channels. And so generally that is email plus phone and LinkedIn, but it
Mhm.
could be like phone, email, and then doing live events. It could be, phone and LinkedIn and direct mail, but like at least three channels. And what sellers so often get wrong is that they're like, well, I am strongest on email, or I prefer LinkedIn. And I'm like, cool, cool, cool. Maybe you will be stronger on those channels. So we'll build some sequences for you that more heavily weight the channels where you're most confident. But like, I'll hold your hands when I say this. It is not about you. Like,
Mhm.
ultimately, I don't care if you, the seller, only want to reach out on LinkedIn. Your prospects have different communication preferences besides just LinkedIn. And so when I think about channel of choice, it is honoring and understanding the fact that the prospects we are reaching out to have different preferences on where they are most likely to engage in a commercial conversation.
Mhm.
So, by including at least three channels in our outreach, that increases the probability that we will reach them where they want to communicate with us. And I just see a lot of sellers sort of like hamstringing themselves by saying, this is the only place that I'm going to reach out because it's where I want to, or because it's where I feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
And again, like just really centering themselves instead of centering the buyer and how they're structuring their outreach.
Yeah, I'm putting the finishing bows on a very big report for Orem here. We're calling it the state of cold calling, and it's tons and tons of data that talks about connect rates and like by persona and seniority. And like the TLDR is like if you're in cybersecurity, good luck if your first part of your sequence is a call, because cybersecurity people don't answer the phone if they don't know who it is. So with those people, even though we are a phone first company, like cybersecurity, connect with them, whether it's through LinkedIn or earning their trust through an email or whatever, and then call them and be like, hey, Leslie, this is Adam from Orem. I know we talked about this thing. I want to get a hold of you. Whereas like conversely, admins, where people think of the term gatekeeper, admins answer the phone and have conversations like to a far greater extent than almost any seniority. And so it's like, okay, if I'm trying to get a hold of a C-suite person and I know through our data that they have an admin, I'm not going to shy away and be like, oh, I want to work around them by trying to find that president of that company and send him a LinkedIn DM. I'm going to call their admin and actually have a conversation. I'm going to be ready with the right pitch. And so I do think, like, to your point, it's great to say I'm a rock star on the phone. I crush it on LinkedIn. I'm like our mutual friend Dom, who's incredible on LinkedIn and he loves it. And he says meeting after meeting, but he also gets on the phone. It does matter, like you said, understanding the data of where your prospects prefer to be reached out to, which I really, really love. And we got a question here that I want to ask you. What's one question you wish more sales reps would ask during discovery and why? Putting you on the spot here.
Okay, let me come back to that one because I
Sure,
don't
sure,
want to
sure.
lose the thread on channel of choice
Oh
because
yeah.
one other thing that I would really encourage people to do is figure out how to layer within channels as well.
Mm,
And cybersecurity is like one of the main industries I serve. Like I have so many of my clients that are reaching out to that like CIO, CTO, CISO persona. Tough. It's a tough
not easy,
persona.
not easy.
For all of them, phone is the best performing channel, but it is not because on their first cold call people are answering. It's
Mm,
because they leave a good voicemail. And while the CIO won't answer the phone call, they will answer the voicemail. And they won't probably open the cold email, but if you point to the email in the voicemail, they'll open the email and they won't respond to the email. But now they know your name. So
mhm.
they'll accept your connect request on LinkedIn and they probably won't engage with it. But then that third time you cold call them, they will recognize the name and they will know that you've been trying to reach out with value
Mhm.
and they'll answer. So it's so interesting that you kind of have to layer in and where appropriate. I have some clients using like texting as
Yeah.
well. It's an opt-in sort of situation. So like know your own laws. I'm not saying like straight
Mhm.
West Coast it with texting, but don't just cold call. Make sure that you are leaving voicemails, that you are maybe sending voice notes, that you are, if you work with a playful demographic, like maybe you're doing like memes or something within there.
Mhm.
So don't just think a channel is like it's only cold calls and that's what I'm going to use it for. Diversify or like layer within that channel. Okay, the question about discovery, like favorite discovery
Yes.
media. Um, Honestly, I wish more reps would just be like, "Hey, are you actually interested in this?"
Mhm.
Because I see so many folks have these sales conversations that feel like they feel a bit forced, they feel a bit thirsty, and then they'll go and they'll open up pipe afterwards, even when there isn't a mutually agreed to next step set. And like I get it because you probably have a manager like lording over you that's like, what's your
Mhm.
forecast? What's your pipeline? But if we just at the end of our calls, like verified that we
Yeah.
have built enough value that this is a conversation that the prospect actually wants to continue with instead of kind of like hoping, dreaming, wishing, having happy years and creating our forecast based on that, we'd have much better pipeline and we wouldn't waste our time. I mean, we waste the prospect's time and that is important, but also like we waste a lot of our own time chasing deals that were never deals to begin with.
Yeah, I interviewed a sales rep. She was at Chili Piper. Her name is Hanya Stimchak, I believe is how you pronounce her last name. And she is wonderful. I think she's actually gone on to become an AE someplace else, but hasn't like I'm not quite sure. But I remember interviewing her and she said, no isn't a bad answer. No is a step forward. So I know if you say, yes, I'm interested, wonderful, I'll book a meeting. If you say, no, I'm not interested, wonderful, I don't have to keep sequencing you. I don't have to keep chasing you. And so that is why I am very cognizant of this because where I work, I get lots of cold calls, I answer them. And I'm very honest with people. I'll be like, listen, when I say now is not a good time, but call me in 6 months, I almost feel like I have to reiterate to them, like, I will answer. I promise you I will answer the phone next time. Now's a bad time. But if it's a no, I'm telling them like we're not interested. We don't need this. And then I'll even like emphasize again, like, please don't keep adding me to your marketing emails. Like, please don't keep doing it. So
Yeah.
no is a
Yes.
good answer too.
No is a good answer too. There's a chapter on like objection handling and like active listening, discovery meetings, two chapters actually.
Hmm.
And I have an objection handling workshop. It's actually one of like my favorite sort of like keynote style workshops that I deliver. And people are always surprised because I start with a 3-step mindset approach
Yeah.
versus like objection frameworks or templates. And I think the mindset with which we respond to objections is often more important than like the specific templates we use. And
Hmm.
so the first thing that I invite sellers to do is to start viewing objections with gratitude
Yeah.
because the alternative to hearing an objection is always worse. It is a hang up. it's a lie, even if it's like a tacit lie. It's like the getting, oh, call me in 6 months. And then you're just like thinking that something exists that doesn't. But if somebody gives you a real objection, that means that they're keeping the door open to a conversation. And so if we can pivot our mindsets to be like, oh, I am grateful that they didn't just hang up on me or brush me off or lie to me. I'm grateful that they trusted me enough that they were honest with their
Mm-hmm.
objections, like with their concerns. It also takes some of the pressure off the seller, I think, to like have that knee jerk reaction where we go into like the telling and selling mode. And instead,
Mm-hmm.
we can be curious in a way that is like more genuine and more authentic, where we're like, huh, I didn't expect you to say that. Like, why? What's up? Instead of
Yeah.
like, well, you're wrong, and I'm going to tell you why. So I know it's a hard one, right? Because we've been taught
Mm-hmm.
our entire careers to like crush objections and like we're going to go out
Mm-hmm.
and snipe those prospects and bulldoze them. But I promise, if you can invite yourself to that like mindset pivot of objections are a good thing, they are a gift, we should be grateful for them. It changes the entire interaction for the better.
Yeah, it's all about like one of our reps here. He always like it's funny to listen if you listen to him do a call block. I know what he's doing, but if you're the prospect on the call, you don't realize like no matter what objection he gets, he says, "That's actually why I called." Like no matter what the objection is, so you'll hear him say, "That's actually why I called," like 17 times in an hour on different
All just
conversations.
all power
Because
hour.
because he's so comfortable basically saying if someone's like, we don't have budget for that right now, he is so comfortable saying, well, that's actually why I called. A lot of people tell us that they don't have budget, but in reality, what they mean is, they don't have budget to add more tech stack. But what if I could tell you insert value proposition as to how our thing helps by to reduce budget? Like understanding that, in reality, I think the number is like there's like 9 objections that you can kind of put every single thing you'll hear into, whether it's like bad timing, no budget, there's like, I think it's like 9 of them. And like, if you can understand just about anything someone says to you as an objection is an opportunity, like you said, to be curious and say like, what do you mean by that? If they say they're walking into a meeting or they're at the dentist, you don't have to say, what do you mean by that? That's obviously a little bit
You can just
straightforward.
say liar.
Yeah. I'm just walking into a meeting, but it's like 2:17 and you're like,
But
no, you're not.
here on that point though, like so the framework that I teach, it's like an invitation to pivot towards an attitude of gratitude, but then it's curiosity, conversation, conclusion. And when we get to the conclusion, it is also a reminder that like, yes, the best conclusion is for us to get that mutually agreed to positive next step that advances the conversation. But that's not the only way that we can pick up a W after a cold call, because we can also say, hey, upon reflection, I realize that like I am after my first 30 seconds constantly having people tell me that they're about to go into a meeting. And like
Yeah.
I know that every single person that I'm talking to is not starting a meeting at 1:17 p.m.
Yeah.
So that's now an opportunity for me as like a conclusion, as a takeaway from my cold calls, to realize that I need to start testing new call openers and new impact
Hmm.
statements, because whatever I'm saying is not resonating at all. Like whatever I'm saying is so boring or irrelevant to these people that every
Yeah.
single one of them would rather lie to me to get me off the phone than like tell me the truth or continue a conversation. So there's always something that we can either like learn about ourselves to help iterate our approach, that we can either maybe help the prospect with, and maybe it is disqualifying. Maybe it's saying, actually, based on what you've told me, this isn't the right fit, or based on what you've told me, I think I should introduce you to this person because they're dealing
Yeah.
with something similar. And hopefully, as often as possible, it is the correct next step is that we had a great conversation and I want to set you up for this like mutually agreed to calendared meeting. But I'm telling you, even if that is not the outcome, there are other W's that you can take out of these conversations.
Mhm. And so something I love about how you reframe objections. I apologize, 'cause I didn't really prep you on this question, but I'm a curious person, and knowing you
You're
a
like,
little
I
bit, I
sent you
think you'll be
27
able.
questions. This wasn't one of them.
This wasn't one of them. Exactly. So, but like thinking about how you reframe objections and how you put that into writing your book, Profit Generating Pipeline, right there by bestseller Leslie Venetz. Knowing that the way that that you reframe objections in my mind is something that is very evergreen, and no matter how lightning fast sales changes right now with AI and different things, that the way that you suggest people approach objections, I think is always going to remain true. And so putting something like that into a book, knowing how fast sales moves, I feel like you could, as the author, feel good in saying like, this is going to hit print. That's always going to be relevant for people. As you were writing this book and knowing that you're writing a sales book and how fast things change, were there other things you put in here where you were thinking like, I feel good about this being evergreen stuff? Because having read it, I feel like I have learned so much and I know that it's going to remain true no matter how much other things change. But are there other things in here similar to how you reframe objections that you think are going to remain true even as our sales world changes every day?
Yes. Um, yeah, I would be so bold as to say like 99% of it,
I would agree.
I think is going to remain true for a few reasons. One is that I was extraordinarily conscientious of not putting in advice that I thought was a moment in time type
Hmm.
advice. And so even when you hear me talking about like specific things that you might want to do on LinkedIn, it isn't do this thing because it's the thing that works. It's like, hey, here's how buyers are interacting with LinkedIn right now. So as a result of that, ask yourself, is this advice that Leslie's about to give applicable to the specific buyers I am reaching out to?
Hmm.
And then this might work for you. If it's not, try this. If it's still not, then you might want to have a conversation with yourself if LinkedIn is even the right platform for you. And if it isn't, maybe it's another social media platform, maybe it's live events, maybe it's direct mail, etc. And so because the book is, I mean, it is practical, it is tactical, there are a ton of techniques in there, but all of it is like, hey, here's the strategy and the mindset that supports what I am recommending.
Hmm.
I think it is very much written in a way that is a blend of like evergreen strategic advice that is very, very much based on here are things that have been true throughout the 20 years of my career,
Yeah.
selling through the Great Recession, selling through the pandemic, selling to Fortune, 100 CISOs, selling to Fortune 500 CFOs, selling to SMB, selling a transactional product, selling a six-figure, like these are the truths that I can share with you, but none of it is drag and drop. Like there
Yeah.
is no time that you should take my playbook and you should drag and drop it into your own playbook. These are the questions that you need to ask yourself so that you can figure out what bits and pieces of this have fit for purpose for your buyers.
Hmm. I love that. Speaking of the way things are changing and moving so quick, we had another question. How do you see AI reshaping the way we build trust in sales conversations? I like that because
Yeah.
I feel like everyone is always talking about here's what AI can do from a process standpoint, but how do you see it changing the importance of trust?
Yeah. It's interesting. I got a lot of I was pushed by multiple people sort of in my network that I needed to make this book about AI for like it to be relevant right now. It needs to
Oh
be
no.
like profit generating pipeline in the times of AI. And I was like, hey, so I hate that. Respectfully, no. And so I do talk a little bit about the role of AI in the book, but like ultimately the things that I push back to are like author's notes. It's like, hey, AI changes really rapidly. Like the best way to find out how I think about AI is to follow me on LinkedIn or follow me on TikTok so that you're getting real time takes. You're not like, listening to outdated advice. But I think a couple of things. One is that a statement I hear a lot that I find really frustrating is like, I'm going to use AI to get a bunch of low value work off of my plate. And I'll be like, cool. Like, what are you going to use AI for then? And they're like, oh, talking to customers, reaching out to all the things I'm going to write to customers. And I'm like, oh, oh, it's just like for me, having conversations with customers is the most important work that I do as a sales
Hmm.
professional, but interesting take. Um, and I found that when I push gently back on people who say that like they don't even realize what they're saying. They haven't even really considered it because there's so much being like shoved in our faces right now from all of these AI companies, like most of which will fail if we're being like
Hmm.
totally candid. Most of which will not make it, or they will be like quickly eaten up by a larger company. That they're like everything AI, AI. Like you should not be doing any work at all. And so they think they're doing what they think they're using AI in the way they should be using AI. And I invite folks to take like a slightly more critical approach to the ways in which they can use AI to actually better serve their customers, not just like try to make their lives easier in a way that makes buying from them really, really gross. So that's like one hot take I have on it.
Yeah. I love that. Our company is sponsoring an event with User Gems in a couple weeks, and it's called the People of GTM. And our new Chief Growth Officer, John Itel, is on this opening panel, and it is about AI tangentially, but it's basically like as GTM leaders, where like the crux of the conversation is like, where are you making sure you're still being a person in this process, more or less? Like
Yeah.
what can you do? And I totally agree with you. Like, especially in sales, there's a ton. I use AI every day. I use AI to like it's like having a buddy in my room where I can bounce ideas off of and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But when it comes to like the sales process, I a perfect example. I am after this call, I'm taking a sales meeting with a tool that I want to use to create a future report. And the initial process was using AI to like give them information about what I'm interested in. But then I'm going to have a human interaction with someone so that I can tell them the nuances of what I want. Like I don't
Yeah.
want to never interact with a person throughout the entire process. That's just me. I assume people feel similarly, but who knows?
Yes. And I mean, like going back to brain science, there's a lot of brain science that like proves this to be true, particularly that like our neurons fire in response to seeing another human's face. So like you smile and I'm like, oh, that's nice. And we just
Right.
like when we see an AI, maybe it's because they're not realistic. Maybe this will change. But like right now, AI does not do the same thing for our brains that human interaction does.
Hmm.
I work with a company called Tango and they use the phrase human in the loop. And
I like
I
that.
have now stolen that and I say it all the time that I think like that is the approach to AI that I really like. And like you, I use a lot of AI. I use a lot of automation and
Better word. Yeah.
I was going to say I often find that people say AI and what they really mean is automation, or like
Hmm.
they think that they are doing like some advanced AI application, but really they're just like clicking the button to say like send at the time that the person's most likely
Yeah.
to open. And like that's all fine and dandy.
Hmm.
But you know, back to the question about like trust. I think one, ask yourself, am I using AI in a way that makes it easier for people to interact with me and buy from me? Or am I just using AI in a way that like helps me cut corners and makes
Hmm.
my life easier while making other people's lives harder? And I also think that there's a transparency question that will come up more. I'm already seeing it come up a lot around content, that like folks want
Yeah.
to know whether or not content has been written by AI. And we're seeing it with pictures and with video. I do think that we will start seeing it with written content, that like if more than 80% of it has been written in AI, that has to be, you know, that has to be to rebuild. And I believe, Adam, that the fact that so many people are asking for that, like, I want to know whether or not this is written by AI, tells me that they are still craving the human connection and they want to interact with somebody that was created with, you know, human hand, human brains. And we will really, really see this when we start getting AI bots that can hold conversations. That I don't think that that's a no. I think especially in like maybe some of the same ways that we will use like self-serve CS functions or just in like transactional environments, there's a real use case to be made for like AI conversational bots, but people need to be able to opt in. And I think if
Mm-hmm.
people like opt in and they're comfortable using them, that's fine. But what I see really eroding trust is when folks think, even if it's like a chat bot and they think they're talking to a human,
Yeah.
and then later they find out that they've been talking to a robot all along, like that erodes trust so fast.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, I totally agree. I could talk about this all day with you, but we're almost at time. So I have one more question for you. Obviously, you spent a ton of time teaching other people in this book. What did you learn about like yourself and sales in general while writing a whole book about it?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. I learned so much about myself. I think, like so many of us, I struggle with imposter syndrome and like writing down. And this is like not even everything I know. This is just like the process I teach specifically for tofu for organizations that are doing mass outbound and being like, oh my gosh, this is just like a piece of this broader knowledge puzzle I have, and seeing it all in one place. I was like, my gosh, Leslie, like look at you. Look at all this knowledge that you've accumulated and how many people you've helped and how much impact you've made. So that was super, super special. I also It's been really incredible the past 2 weeks as folks have started getting their books and reading them and reading reviews, in two ways. One, to see what's reflected back to me and what people are getting from the book. And one of the things that I like, the trust piece I'm hearing a lot, and like earn the right. But one of the things I'm hearing a lot is how much of it is based on buyer psychology and behavioral science. And that's a real passion for me. But I don't think that I would have ever described myself as like a sales strategist who teaches behavioral psychology, but like I'm seeing that reflected back to me a lot. And then also just like how many people I've previously managed that I have not
Hmm.
talked to in years that have reached out to me, like, oh, I've been following your career for the past decade, and like you're the best manager I've ever had. No other manager has taught me as much as you have. Like no other manager has been as instrumental in my career. And I think, like all of us that manage people, you sometimes wonder, like, did I do a good job? Like I really tried hard. Like I gave it my level best, but like I hope that I left these folks better off than I found them. And then to have so many, like it's making me emotional thinking about it. Like to have so many people come unsolicited inbound to share the impact I made on them is like it's so meaningful.
Well, you should be very, very proud of yourself as a instant best-selling author. Leslie, the book is fantastic. I can't thank you enough. Thank you for
Thank
spending so much time
you.
with me today.
Thank you, my fellow book lover and dear friend. This was great.